talk to your speakerphone.
Okay. I am going to stay muted unless I have something to say on
Okay.
my end.
All right. It works. Everybody can hear you loud and clear.
Lovely.
Okay. And then see, that's going to be. All right, I'm just going to use this one. We will go ahead and call this special meeting to order. You're happy, right, Joe? Okay. We will start, as ever, with our Pledge of Allegiance and salute to the New Mexico flag in English and in Spanish, as well as the acknowledgement of tribal land. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, a symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. Saludo la bandera del Estado de Nuevo México, el símbolo de amistad perfecta entre culturas unidas. And the acknowledgement of tribal land. We acknowledge that our Board of Education meeting is taking place on occupied indigenous land. We acknowledge the Tesuque Pueblo lands and other tribal lands on which we stand. We honor these people, past, present, and future. We acknowledge the history and ongoing colonization of where we are sitting right now in New Mexico and in our country. We acknowledge our own place in the story of colonization. Thank you very much. Just also to note that 3 of us are here, including myself, Dr. Gonzalez, and Board Member Anderson, and we do have Secretary Bose on the phone. Now to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
I move approval of the agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez.
I'll second.
Thank you, Board Member Anderson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have approved the agenda. Roman numeral 2, introduction of interpreter. Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Obo, members of the board. Unless Ms. Pollard or Mr. Zamora needs an interpreter, we'll be watching to see if anybody is in attendance to provide that service.
Thank you. Okay, we are on to Roman numeral 3, board discussion and possible action. The first item is the acceptance of the resignation of Vice President Rudy Garcia. Board members, I believe everyone has seen the letter of resignation. So I will go ahead and move that we accept the resignation of Vice President Rudy Garcia, which, according to the letter, was effective at 5 p.m. on Monday.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And just to note, in case it's not on the recording, that Secretary Bose did say aye. We all did vote aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. And we can think about, we have a bunch of business to talk about to move forward, but of course we want to thank Rudy Garcia for his service to this district. He's been on the board for a good long time. He was originally appointed at the end of a term when then board member Linda Trujillo resigned. And then, of course, he was elected recently to a term and is, I think, was in the third year of that term. So we certainly will think about hopefully acknowledging and appreciating his service to the district. And then we need to move on to item B, which is looking at the process and timeline for appointment of a board member for District 4. And I know a few things. I don't think we printed out a suggested, oh, we did. Timeline, here we go. We have a number of papers, relevant papers in front of us. We also, of course, have our board counsel, Gino Zamora, here with us, who can, Gino, you might as well step up to the microphone because I'm going to start asking you questions, I'm sure, who can talk us through a number of things. He's guided districts through this even quite recently. But ultimately, tonight, I think we want to establish a clear timeline and plan and move forward. We have 45 days from the date of the resignation, which I think took us to August 1.
Board President Noble, August 3rd.
3rd, okay. So there we are. Gino, do you want to frame this for us in some special way?
Sure.
Mr. Zamora.
Board President Noble, Superintendent Chavez, board members, thank you for this opportunity. With our law firm, Ortiz and Zamora, both Tony Ortiz and myself, we often assist our school districts as board counsel with the filling of vacancies. It happens relatively often, not regularly, but it happens relatively often. And we attempt to assist boards through the process to make sure that it's a diligent process, an open process, and that the board can do their best to select a new board member. There are basics in statute. Board President Noble covered one of them. You have 45 days to fill a vacancy. If you do not, NMPED steps in and NMPED fills the vacancy after 45 days. You lose that authority to fill. So the timeline's relatively short and for the type of work you wish to do. Another basic is that the person to be selected needs to be a qualified elector, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in depth in a moment, but a qualified elector residing in the board member district, here District 4, and residing within those boundaries as they exist. And that individual must be registered in that board district. So not simply physically being located there, but also be registered within that board district. Beyond that, statutorily and through regulation, there's not a lot more to do. Now, that said, there's a difference between what's required and what's best practices. So you could just select someone, appoint them, put them in the spot with no process at all, so long as they meet that criteria. But the best practices we've seen statewide involve verification purposes. For example, requesting and receiving and reviewing a copy of a certified voter card that establishes the residency and the registration within the district. And that can be obtained from a county clerk by any applicant. Application, that tends to be a best practice. There's an application form that someone's going to fill out to provide some basic personal and work information. You want to make sure that there aren't going to be some inherent conflicts. Getting affirmance as far as their residency and location. I've seen applications that ask things such as years living within the district, whether or not an applicant has children in the schools or any other experience or formerly had children in the schools, to see if they've had experience with kids going through the school system. Other example questions within an application have been along the topic of experience with other governing boards, either serving on or working with governing boards. Questions regarding what is your vested interest in Santa Fe Public Schools or the school district? What other community or volunteer work have you performed? And why do you want to be a school board member? It's interesting. For decades, I've helped fill vacancies in various roles. And that first question, why do you want to serve in this position, is typically the hardest question. And so I've seen those on applications. Now, what I'm talking about really is replicating as best as possible that gauntlet that everybody has to run for candidacy as a board member. Well, there's not an election. It's an election of 4. And by the way, to approve, and this is by statute, the new board member and fill the vacancy, it has to be by a vote of a majority of the remaining members. So there are 4 members remaining. It's got to be 3 votes. We've also run into an instance where 8 candidates, board voted 2-2, 2-2, 2-2, and then it went to PED as a result because they could never agree on a 3-1 vote. So those things happen. I don't expect that to happen here, but those things happen. When I say we're replicating the gauntlet, when someone applies to run for school board, there is not a background check. As candidates, you don't perform a fingerprint test or a fingerprint. You don't provide those. You don't get a background check and then get on the ballot. So that's not something we typically see in the application process. However, an election process certainly opens someone up to a review of public records. So oftentimes school districts will assign us as council or someone else. It's typically us because we're removed from the process. We're not employees who might be seen as picking one board member or another. But there's a public records review through NM courts to see if there's any type of criminal history that could affect selection. And that brings up a point. The word qualified elector, which I spoke of earlier, a qualified elector includes, well, let me reverse the language. You are not a qualified elector if you have a felony conviction that has not been pardoned, or your rights have not otherwise been your political rights, not voting rights, but political rights, haven't otherwise been restored. So someone with an existing felony would not be qualified to serve in public office, as the statute states. And so there's a lot in there. So that sort of encourages in the application process and the review process a review of NewMexicoCourts.com and other public information to ensure that someone is qualified and not disqualified from serving in this office.
Thank you very much. And just to add to that, when we did this, I've now been a part of appointing 2 board members. One was very easy because, of course, Lorraine Price had passed, and board member Anderson was the only person who registered to run for that seat. So that was very straightforward. The previous one, which was when Rudy Garcia was originally appointed to the board, we did a process that worked, I think, relatively well. That included, and so this just to say is my frame of reference, that included an application process very close to what was outlined here, that came from Mr. Zamora's partner, Tony Ortiz, I believe, and maybe some upgrades by the superintendent and team. But we asked for a letter of interest, a resume, proof of residency, and then we did, to all responsive applicants, we did some public interviews. And we worked and established some questions for the interviewees. We had 2 applicants, Rudy Garcia and one other, and we did a discussion in an open meeting. Because this is not personnel, board members are not employees of the district. We have to do everything in an open meeting. And I guess my suggestion would be that we follow a somewhat similar process in order to cast the net wide and do our best to vet and provide the public some clear transparency into the candidates who apply. And of course, their documents will be public records submitted to the school district. So, questions, thoughts? Go ahead, Dr. Gonzalez.
Madam President, Superintendent Chavez, Member Anderson.
And Secretary Bose is here.
And Secretary Bose, for sure. So we're going to do this in public, and we're going to have the discussion in public, and like a week before August 3rd? Or how soon before that do we?
So on this, we might as well look at a proposed timeline here on this. But the idea was to give our district team a minute to pull everything together, that we would put this out as of Tuesday, June 28th. This has definitely been added to by your team, but a button titled Board of Education BOE District 4 information will be located on the SFPS website. We might want to call it something slightly more accessible, but anyway, we put a button on the webpage and have all information and requirements and how to submit the requirement documents very clearly there on the website with a 2-week window for submission. So closing on, and we sort of pegged this to Tuesdays in part because our superintendent has some travel planned and we do want him to be able to be here to listen, pay attention, hear what we say, all the things. But that we would keep it open until almost 2 weeks, July 11th, and then well, that doesn't work. Actually, we couldn't have a special meeting on July 12th. We'd need a minute to have it pulled together and reviewed. So we could have a special meeting on July 19th to interview candidates and then look at, I don't know if July 26th was an issue for you, but basically push that a week because I think we wouldn't be able to inform folks to come in if we closed it on July 11th, if you see what I mean.
July 26th.
Yeah, so we'd go maybe to the 19th and then a meeting on the 26th if we needed another one, but we could also just do it on July 19th. And then we'd still have a tiny bit of wiggle room to the next Tuesday, August 2nd, before August 3rd, which is our deadline. And, you know, with the caveat that if we had, and maybe we might want to ask 2 board members or something of the district staff, just to make sure that we have it's this language that's above that. The board will consider all applications and reserves the right to reject any applications that are not fully responsive to all requests for information, including follow-up requests where required. The board may hold interviews if it so chooses, but the point being, we might get some applications that are not considered fully responsive. You know, if there's no letter of interest, honestly, I'm not interested in somebody that can't put pen to paper and tell us why they want to be on the school board. So that sort of thing. And we might need just a couple board members to look at those things, and unless we wanted to do it all together, and decide who would be invited to come do a discussion publicly with us. Okay, Dr. Gonzalez is happy to work on that.
Madam President, I'm also happy to work on that if you need a second board member.
Thank you, Sec.
Me talking through your phone.
Thank you, Secretary Bozay. I think I'm going to do this. It's easier to try and do one mic. Thanks, Cody, though. I appreciate it. Too many buttons. No longer a broadcaster. Okay, so Secretary Bozay, Gino, does that sound like a valid process? Do you want to? I'm going to see how many times we can say the phrase replicating the gauntlet. But do you want to tell us any more about how we might replicate the gauntlet of running for office in this process?
Everything that you've described, President Noble, really reflects a diligent and thorough process. How each district does it is unique to their board, unique to their community. But most importantly, it's about providing the board with comfort in the person they're selecting, and providing your school community with comfort and transparency during the process.
Thank you. And what we've now been provided, Secretary Bozay, we could certainly get this to you, but I might even suggest that if Dr. Gonzalez and Secretary Bozay are making sure that we have responsive candidates to interview, I would say, Board Member Anderson, maybe you and I should be in charge of looking at, and we can certainly, you know, at the questions that we would ask. And in the minutes here, we have the 10 questions that were worked on and decided by the previous board when Rudy Garcia was appointed. So we have those as a reference point, but we might want to think about them in the context of today and update them.
That sounds great to me. I'm happy to do that.
Madam
Yeah,
President,
go
so the tentative schedule, we would be getting the applications on the 11th, correct, of July?
Board President Noble, Board Member Gonzalez, it closes on the 11th, and so it'll give us at least a day to get you all the information.
Okay,
So on the
so
12th.
the 12th on, we would have time to look at the, so maybe Sarah and I can actually get together in person and look at them all at once. Would be good for me.
I think
That is agreeable to me.
that is agreeable. Thank you.
Madam President, could I ask a couple of questions?
Of course, please go ahead.
Thank you. Can employees of the district serve on the board? Could a teacher serve on the school board?
The short answer is no, because of conflict of interest
Okay.
Issues.
Okay, I think, right.
Yeah.
Hey.
Indeed, and do. Are there any other conflicts of interest that we should know about going into it?
The main one would be any employee, so we wouldn't limit it to teachers. It would be any employee of the district would be the major issue. Beyond that, it would just be situational. I wouldn't say that contractors are prohibited, but it could lead to other problems. And that's part of why I recommend in the application and the basic collection of info, you ask for work info and probably whether or not they conduct any business with the school district. But It's hard to name it off the top of my head, but it's going to be situational. The
Thank you so
easiest
much.
category is employees.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. And then, Madam President, members of the board, superintendent, is there an opportunity for public feedback? Would we post the resumes and cover letters on the website to get any input from the public? Would that figure into our decision at all?
I think we get to, decide that. We certainly could, and I would suggest, if we want to do that, that we explicitly build it in clearly to our timeline.
I think it might be interesting. I just know as a member of the public, seeing the superintendent resumes and cover letters was really helpful, like made me feel like I was part of the process and made me feel really confident in the selection of the superintendent as a parent in the district. So it might be helpful to have those. I don't know how many people are interested in that, but it might be interesting, or not interesting, it might be helpful to have those posted somewhere so that people could see them, and if they feel strongly about something one way or another, they could let us know. I don't know anyone else's thoughts on that.
Madam President.
Go ahead, Secretary Bozay.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez. I agree with Board Member Anderson about getting some, I kind of just thought if those are going to be posted between the time period of the 11th and the 19th, then maybe at the meeting on the 19th, when we have public forum, that could be the format for the public to give their feedback on the applicants. But I certainly, whatever is decided, I certainly would like to hear feedback from the public if they have that. Thank you.
Madam President, just to follow up on that, I think we also might want to offer an option for someone to give us feedback privately through email if they don't feel comfortable saying X, Y, or Z in public forum with their name attached to it. We might want to also offer them maybe the option to just email the president, or to email. I mean, they could also email the entire board. We just can't respond to them as a board. So maybe there's an opportunity for them to also reach out to us.
I think the timing, I guess getting it onto the website like a day or two before the 19th would be doable. I mean, Sarah and I would have to get together that week before to see if there's any that we want to eliminate, so.
I guess I agree with all of that, and I appreciate and maybe we want to be explicit about the ability to email the board privately. I do, yeah. Do worry a little bit about, public forum becoming a bun fight, but that's not usually what happens. Okay, so let's see. So if we say applications, I'm just going to spitball some additional timelines here. On Tuesday, July 11th, which is actually July 12th, the Tuesday, unless I'm looking at the wrong year. No, I'm looking at the right year. Tuesday, July 12th. If we said that applications were due by noon. Let me just say, does everybody feel like 2 weeks is a good amount of time to keep this open? Okay. I'm seeing nods.
They're due on the 11th, the day before the 12th.
Oh, okay, got it.
Well, I don't know about noon, but they're due on the 11th, Monday.
It's really up to you guys to
Yeah,
set when
we
they're
can
due,
just
so.
decide.
Yeah.
This is Tuesday. Okay, so we could do on Monday, July 11th at noon. And that a commitment to have candidates invited for interviews, resumes and letters up by the close of business on July 15th, assuming
nobody critical is off that week in terms of putting things up on the website or whatever else needs to happen. Does that sound reasonable on that Friday?
Yeah.
And then Secretary Bose's idea is probably a good one, that we invite, that we have public, oh, that could be a long meeting too, but that's all right. If we're going to invite everybody for interviews in addition to public comments about the applicants, and do all of that in the meeting on July 19th. So two things would have to happen on the 15th. Everybody who's invited for an interview would need to be notified and letters and resumes posted publicly.
Madam President,
Mm.
could we put this entire timeline up on the website so that applicants know I need to be available on the 15th? Okay.
Well, they'd be available
Or
the
on the 19th, excuse me, yeah, so they know before the 15th.
Yes, we want to put everything, I feel very strongly about that, everything really clearly up on the website so that you don't have to be watching this meeting and sausages being made in order to coherently apply, even though everybody should be watching, frankly, if they want. Okay, so those two things would happen by the 15th. Letters and resumes go up. And everyone is contacted, you know, ideally with an email and or phone call if needed, on July 15th to come on July 19th.
But that'll already be on the website so that they know, right? They don't schedule something for the 19th. in case
Correct.
they're invited.
Correct. All right, so let me back up. We will put out on Tuesday, June 28th. We will get this clear. Everything goes up on the website, and a press release goes out with all of the details and community announcement, however we want to do it. Let's, you know, cast as wide a net as we can. On the 28th, all of that is clear and posted. It's open for 2 weeks. It closes just under 2 weeks at noon on July 11th. Then Dr. Gonzalez and Secretary Bose get together, do the vetting, determine who's invited for interviews on the 19th, which has been clearly posted ahead of time as part of the timeline. And those folks are notified no later than close of business July 15th, and the letters and resumes go up on the website as well. We then have an agenda on July 19th that includes inviting public comment on what's been posted on the website on our candidates, asking for it to stay civil, I would say. And, you know, honestly, it'd be an amazing problem to have so much public comment that we ended up running late and long, and so many great applicants that we run late and long. But just to be clear, that could happen. And we want to prepare for the best case scenario of a long meeting on July 19th. Go ahead, Dr. Gonzalez.
Madam President, Superintendent Chavez, board members, do we, now I went through that whole thing and I forgot what I was going to say. I'll remember in a bit, sorry. It's been a long day, travel.
I hear you.
Madam President.
Go ahead, Secretary Bose.
Thank you. I just would like some clarification as far as the process that Dr. Gonzalez and I will be doing. We are just reviewing the applications for completion and making sure that all the required documents have been provided. It's not an opportunity for us to say, we think this is a good person or not a good person. Is that correct? It's not so much our opinion factoring in as it is checking the steps of the application and all of the documents that we have requested and the records that we will be reviewing.
I think that's correct. And we should talk a little bit more about the application. There's a gray area there, but loosely, I think that's right, Secretary Bozé, precisely right, that what you're doing is, it's not a first cut. It's
Right.
reviewing, basically, just because I don't think we can ask the staff to do this. I think we need board members to do this and to review the applications for responsiveness. Because again, this is not hiring, this is not an HR process, this is a board appointment. And so another piece in there, we should talk more about, but I think you will be reviewing for letters of interest, a resume, proof of residency, New Mexico court records. I would suggest that we, you can use your judgment if there is someone with a gray area felony. I don't know what that would be. I'm sure that Gino can tell me what that a felony that's been dismissed or something. But ultimately, in the definition Mr. Zamora provided of a qualified elector, it's not a felon. It's not a convicted felon. So another thing that will need to happen in that week, and maybe assuming Mr. Zamora and Mr. Ortiz never go on vacation, or at least some of their vacations are done, but is what Mr. Zamora suggested, the review of public records to see for any convicted felons.
Okay, thank you.
Dr.
I just wanted to make sure and to clarify for any public that might be listening that vetting doesn't mean us putting our opinions about a potential candidate into play, that it's more of a procedural checklist than anything else.
Yeah, great. Dr. Gonzalez.
Thank you.
Madam President, Superintendent Chavez, members of the board, didn't have that on. How many applicants have applied in the past? Because it seems to me like, say we had 30, I don't think we will, but if we did, it seemed like we would have to do some vetting to not have to interview 30 people or 25 if we decided 5 of them didn't put in all their documents that we needed.
So last time we had 2 applicants.
So I don't think we'll have an issue with it.
And I think that we might have to adjust on the fly if we did, and we would have, I think, a couple of options. One would be to skip interviews and discuss in open meetings who we might invite to interview. And I do feel strongly that you and Secretary Bozé should not do that alone without Board Member Anderson and I also being able to weigh in on who gets interviews, let's say, if we have 30 applicants. I think we will have more this time for any number of reasons, but personally I've received 4 inquiries roughly already. A number of folks who do not actually live in District 4, so that will also be something that, and we'll get back to the application and requirements that we want to clearly enumerate on the website. But the other thing we could do is split it up over 2 meetings. If we really did have 30 qualified people and we want to interview them all, What we did the last time, I believe, and I can review this to jog my memory, but not only did we determine the questions ahead of time, but we asked the candidates just in good faith to stay out while another candidate was interviewed, just so that we didn't give an advantage to the last person being interviewed, if you see what I mean. And that worked relatively well. Again, there were only 2 of them. It was, but we might want to do that.
Board President Noble,
Go ahead, board member.
should we randomize the order in which candidates are interviewed?
Probably.
Okay.
As opposed to what?
Well, alphabetical or in order of application date, or I guess it sounds, much more logical when you put it that way.
It's fine. It's all good to clarify. I'm just a little punchy.
So one of the most important things it seems like we need is proof of residency. Make sure they are in, because I've had a few people ask me, and they are not in District 4. And
Yeah.
some would be good, some not so good, but
So here's the other thing. We are in the process of redistricting. We saw 3 map options the other day, so we might need to ask for help in determining if anyone would be districted out of any of our options that are being considered, right? You know, does that make sense? Because one of the considerations that was, if you recall, in the redistricting presentation, at the bottom of everything, it says does not pair incumbents. So the team did look at where we live. I don't think any of the current board members, and adding Rudy Garcia to that, are near the edges, are in the areas that we're, but, you know, it might just be a consideration. If we have our favorite candidate in an area that is likely to be districted out, we might just want to be fully cognizant of that. Did you want to add something, Superintendent? Okay. So yeah, we got a few things to do. Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone on this, but for this, no, I know this because I just read it. This person will have to run in the next election, which is November 2023.
Correct.
Right? Is that when you're up? Okay. Go ahead.
Under every circumstance, a person who fills a vacancy will be up for election at the next general election, which would be November 2023. Regardless of whether or not that's the end of the term, anyone appointed has to stand for election. It just happens to be, as I understand it, the end of the 4-year term that Vice President Garcia would have served.
Correct. Yep. And what we would really like, and, you know, we can reflect this both in our application and in our questions, is somebody to run. I mean, truly, I don't personally want to appoint someone who has no interest in running for this seat in a year and a half, or continuing to occupy the seat beyond that time. So that may also be something we want to consider.
President Noble?
Go ahead.
As you're determining who you wish to consider, I'd like to go back to Board Member Anderson's question about a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important that candidates be aware, and it might be important as part of the questionnaire and the application. Do you have family employed with the district? That being parents, spouse, siblings, and in-laws of the siblings, and by the way, children also. And the reason I raise that is so that an applicant is aware if they come on to the board, it has an effect on that family member or family members who cannot be originally hired with the district while that person serves on the board. And as we advise, there are limitations on promotion while that family member is a board member, while the board member has family within the district. It creates, there are statutory conflicts against hiring and promotion of a board member's family.
And when you say children, you mean children employed?
Children employed, correct.
Yeah. So, should we talk about this application thing that Mr. Zamora has alluded to a couple of times? What we have in front of us looks at a letter of interest and a resume. Do you know, you've said a couple times an application with, and we could include just some, you know, key questions to answer, which would get at this conflict of interest thing. What else would you recommend that we ask for up front, and do you have an application?
I do have a form that we've used in another district, and have time to sort of clean out the other district info in it before this evening, but I will leave a draft with you, President Noble. So again, it depends on the board. What you are doing, what you've discussed this evening is a really good process, and a letter of interest, dots some I's and crosses some T's. It gets to what you're looking for as far as what's your interest in the district, why are you doing this, all of those things. So I've seen applications that don't call for a letter of interest, just they ask all your interests through the application. I would say at a base level, you would look at possibly a one-page application which collects the basic information that we've talked about. Contact, name, verifications of voter status, any of these potential conflicts that we've identified. And so you can keep it at the basics and then add that letter of interest and the interview process after that. So you seem to be on track with what you've discussed already this evening.
And with 2 weeks, so I think this is a decent plan, a one-page application with basic information and questions about conflicts and anything else. Even just, are you a convicted felon? We could have that.
This is not employment, so there isn't a prohibition on asking that question. There is not a prohibition on asking that question.
Okay.
Because they're not employees.
And then, Gino, talk to us about best practices around the residency, proof of residency. I mean, should we ask for, you said certified voter card, with the 2-week time frame doesn't seem to me overly burdensome, but is there something else you'd recommend, or what?
That is the most direct and the most secure. Alternatively, it's just affirmations. I live at this address, I'm registered at this address. For those of us that have been involved with elections, what people know and assume may not actually be what's on their voter card, and it can be a wake-up call for them when they go pull their voter card. So the best information is a certified copy of a voter card. Otherwise, it would be affirmations in the application. I affirm that I live at this address. I affirm that I'm registered at this address.
Board President Noble.
Go ahead.
Since we're pulling the felony information, is there any opportunity to also, in the public record search, see anything about crimes against children or sex offenses?
Yes. Now, the limitation is this. It's a New Mexico courts, nmcourts.com search of public records. It is limited to New Mexico. And it would be difficult, you could, but it would be difficult to replicate that across 50 states.
Just one more question, President Noble. This is going to sound silly, but are we allowed as board members to Google the applicants and find out more about them just out in the world? Is that appropriate?
It's not inappropriate. As a board member, you're going to do your research and you're going to do your diligence. I would just advise as a best practice to be balanced about it and it not be used as a method of elimination versus a method of gathering as much balanced information as possible.
Sorry, it just cracks me up. It's the lawyer's answer. Is it appropriate? It's not inappropriate. I mean, the other thing I think we'd want to agree as a board, what we did the last time was follow, I suppose, what is best hiring practices, which is we established 10 questions ahead of time and did not deviate from them based on anybody's Googling or anything else. And we asked the same 10 uniform questions to the 2 candidates. Gino, do you want to comment on that? I mean, this is, let me try and channel you for a second. I'm guessing that Gino will say something about how, for the public, this would be the fair, transparent thing to do, is to keep the consistent questions, although we are not necessarily bound to do that if there were some burning something that we needed to ask a single candidate.
That President Noble, you've summarized it correctly. Again, I would advise that it is a best practice to have your questions be consistent for every candidate. That way you have a consistent measuring stick for everyone. But again, this is not an employment circumstance. And you can vary, but I would advise to vary as little as possible so that it's easy to compare apples to apples as far as questions go.
And make sure that we're replicating the gauntlet fairly.
I had not said that in at least 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I would suggest roughly the following from here, and forgive me for the repetition, but just to keep everything clear. I am happy to review Gino's generic form that he will leave, and then, ask that the superintendent send it to all board members to make sure that you all feel good about what is on the form, which will be a roughly 1-page requirement, as well as a letter of interest. We have some verbiage here that defines what we would want in the letter of interest, which I think is pretty good, but would ask that anybody also think about upgrading that if you feel strongly. So we will ask for the application form, 1 page, a letter of interest, a resume, and do we feel good about a certified voter card? Being very specific about proof of residency within District 4.
Madam President?
Yes.
Would we want any references? Is that standard, or is that something that's ever done? References?
Member Gonzalez, or what I'm wrestling with in my mind is how within this compressed process to follow through on that, to call them, to report that
Right.
back at a meeting. That I'm struggling with that. I'll give Board President Noble another smile, which is it's not incorrect to do, not inappropriate to do. I'm just trying to figure out how logistically to do it.
It seems too complicated at this time.
Although there's some element of, what people choose to put on their resume.
Sure.
So that if somebody wants to list Dr. Carmen Gonzalez as a reference, just to be impressive, they could. Yeah, but it also might beg the response from one of us, nobody said to me I was going to be a reference, which, happens every so often. Anyway, but I think unless you want to suggest some way to use that, that we just leave that to whether it's, anybody can include it on their resume. Okay, so application one-pager, letter of interest saying something close to what we have here, resume, proof of residency within District 4 in the form of a certified voter card are the things we're asking for. The timeline is that this goes up on the website by next Tuesday, the 28th. Applications are open until July 11th at noon. Then during the week of July 11th, 3 things are happening. Secretary Bozay and Dr. Gonzalez are meeting to determine basically responsive candidates who will then be posted with their letters of interest and relevant documents on the website by July 15th. And we will figure out how to, whether this is you, Gino and Tony, you can tell us, but to get some public records searches on NewMexicoCourts.gov. So that's you that week. Thank you. And as well as some vetting of addresses against our redistricting maps, just so we can be fully aware of all of that. We don't want that to come back and bite us. And, you know, if our favorite candidate is in there, we can at least go into that conversation fully aware. Then we meet on, and the candidates are notified and invited explicitly to come on July 19th. Then we meet on July 19th with public forum focused on our school board candidates for appointment, and ideally interviews with a reasonable number of exceptionally good candidates. And then we can either decide to appoint that night, or we can come back if we need a little more time on the 26th to think about it.
Madam President?
Go ahead, Secretary Bozay.
Thank you. In your timeline that you just outlined, did you make note of, on the 15th as well, all of the resumes and the cover letters being posted on the website?
I did.
Okay. Sorry, I missed that.
No worries.
President
Madam
Noble?
President,
Yes, go ahead, Dr. Gonzalez.
earlier you had mentioned that we want to make sure that they're running, that they have an interest in actually running for the position. So do we want that in the letter of interest?
I have it as a list of something to go on the application questions.
Yes, good.
You know.
That'll take care of it.
And of course, life happens. People might change their minds, but I think we do want to ask, you know, do you intend to run for this seat in November 2023? Or however we phrase it, you know.
And President Noble, I think that's, it's phrased correctly. Are you willing to run in November, run to retain this position in November 2023? In addition, things are popping in my mind for this application. If you can request first, middle, and last name, and birth year, not birth date, but birth year. In an nmcourts.com search, that's how the information will be presented.
Thank you. Okay. What are we missing? Oh, here's what we're missing. So as it says in this text we have here that was drafted by Tony Ortiz, I think, I guess it's number 1, in the letter of interest, a statement that the applicant has read and fully understands the role requirements of the position as expressed in New Mexico state statute and school board policy. So I think And what I would suggest, again, Superintendent, is, as with the application, that we work on getting exactly what's going up right and then circulate it to the board either tomorrow or Monday for publication on Tuesday, and would ask that each of you, glance at that. And then we will provide, I think, the statutes that are on the desk in front of us, or at least,
President
well, we
Noble?
can figure out what the key relevant ones are. I'm not sure we need all of these, but I think we need a few of them, and certainly this school board policy on duties and authorities of the board. There's a 3-page policy, which is, policy 100, as well as the attendance and board vacancies policy. And just to be clear, because we do have a policy that says how this is going to work, which we're following, of course. And it is very clear that they need to, that an election will be held to fill the vacancy, which will just be a term. Gino, did you want to say something else?
No, you read my mind on posting of the policies in the same location as the application.
Yeah. Okay. Does that sound about right? Other questions, comments, thoughts?
I look forward to lots of well-qualified applicants. I hope this is a very difficult decision for us to make.
Hallelujah. Superintendent, anything pressing on your mind?
No, I just think, and I'll continue to text you guys and give you guys notice whenever something's sent through email, I'm sorry. So that way you guys know to check your email box.
All right, are we reasonably clear on the timeline to your mind? I think I've got it, but I might lose it after I walk out of here. But for now, it's solid, and I'm sure we do have recordings and Ruth.
Yep, and we'll send you guys kind of a summary, just real quick timeline, just make sure that we have it all clear, and then we'll continue to work towards Tuesday.
Secretary Bozé, you've been great at speaking up. Just want to give you the opportunity to, again, if you want to.
Madam President, I have no additional questions or comments at this time. Thank you.
All right. Anyone? Going once, going twice? Okay. We are now working in July. But, this is obviously an important process. So, and to echo Board Member Anderson's comments, that we hope that we get lots of interested, incredible people. Oh, one other thing we will need to do is post the map, the current map, right? To make sure that people can look at it and zoom in and see if they believe, because that is number one question, is like, are you in District 4?
President Noble?
Yes.
And I think another easy way for them to figure out whether or not they're in the district is contacting the county clerk, and they would be able to notify, run that address, and then give them an update as to what district they're in.
Superintendent, I believe they can also go to nmvote.org and look up their voter registration, which should have all of their districts listed as well, if they wanted to do that. Don't ask me how I know how to look up voter information.
Madam President, it can get confusing. I'm in District 1 for school board, but I'm in District 2 for everything else. So, you know, people could think they're in District 4 and they're not.
Yeah.
So,
I think this is going to be our number one question, and I would suggest all the things. You know, if we can get the map up, if we can even provide guidance to, we should verify that, but I think you're right, nmvote.org. But yeah, I forget, I think I'm in County Commission District 3, School Board District 3, City Council District 1, and Legislative District, Lord knows, 46. Okay. But yeah, and it is on your voter card, right? So if you get the voter card, it's there. But let's do our best to make it really easy for people to verify, because obviously we don't want to take people's time writing a letter and filling out an application for them only to discover that they're in District 4 for City Council, but whatever Sarah's district is for school board. 5. No, that's yours. She's 2. Okay. Yep. Yeah, you're like, yeah, he's 5. Okay, so thank you in advance, Superintendent, to you and everybody at the district supporting us in this process. This is going to be a decent amount of work for all of us, but again, really important, and we will get a great representative for School Board District 4. I'm confident. If there's nothing further, we'll go ahead and say this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.